welcome you guys all to the Bridge Club. We're really glad that you chose to spend your time with us. I'll go ahead and get things kicked off so that we're conscientious of everybody's time. I'm Dr. Amanda Landis-Hanna. I'm the Vice President for Veterinarians at Heal House Call Veterinarian, which is an organization that helps veterinarians start their own house call and mobile practices. There are a few rules that I want to let everyone know about. First off, have your beverage, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, whether it's a grown-up drink or a non-grown-up drink, whatever suits you. We always start all of our bridge conversations with a toast. We have muted everybody's lines. I believe that that's happening right now with Shannon. And we're going to do things a little bit differently from how we normally do. Normally, we encourage everybody to turn on the cameras, which Dr. Cheryl did, so we could all get a chance to see each other and wave. But we do understand that tonight is a sensitive subject, and keeping that in mind, you do what's most comfortable for you. You can turn off your camera or change your name to something inconspicuous if that makes you feel more comfortable with this topic. The chat function will remain active for those that want to share anything with the group or ask any questions. If you'd like to ask the questions anonymously, please DM those to Shannon Noack, and she will ask them to the guest speakers on your behalf. So you do have a way to comment anonymously if you so choose. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Veterinary professionals and others are currently struggling. These last few years have been really tough within the profession as well as with outside of the profession, especially considering what's been going on with the world. Oftentimes as caregivers, we're not taking care of ourselves. So we've brought a few guest panelists to discuss how we should begin to take care of our mental health. I'm now going to introduce our speakers. I know you will all be as excited about them as I am. Dr. Genie Bishop received her doctorate of veterinary medicine from Oklahoma State University in 1981. She moved to East Texas and worked at several clinics before purchasing a mixed practice in Kilgore, Texas in 1984. In 1996, she led a clinic to winning the Pfizer's Practice of Excellence Award in 96. She went on to become a feature writer for Veterinary Economics magazine and was later asked to serve on the Veterinary Economics Editorial Advisory Board. After the sale of her clinic in 2002, she became an associate instructor at Tulsa Community College of Veterinary Technology, where she taught medicine, surgery, and microbiology, as well as working relief at several area clinics. In 2005, she accepted the position of professional service veterinarian for Royal Canin Veterinary Diets. In 2014, she assumed the position of national accounts veterinarian, and in 2016, she became the first scientific communications manager for veterinary marketing. She has focused her energy in promoting mental wellness in the veterinary profession and earned the Veterinary Human Support Certificate from University of Tennessee in 2020. Kelsey Creelman started working in the veterinary field as an assistant when she was 17. Kelsey worked full-time in this position while completing her bachelor's degree in psychology from Finlandia University. After graduating in 2015, Kelsey spent the next 5 years working in a mixed animal practice in Michigan, then a small animal ICU and specialty referral clinic in Virginia. In 2020, Kelsey discovered the field of veterinary social work and knew it would be her future career. Kelsey was accepted to an accelerated Master of Social Work program at Virginia Commonwealth University in 2021. She attended her program while she continued to work as an ICU veterinary assistant. Kelsey completed her degree while simultaneously starting the Veterinary Social Work Certificate program with the University of Tennessee. Currently, Kelsey is pursuing her clinical LMSW license and her VSW certificate while continuing her work in the only veterinary internal medicine department in the state of New Mexico. Kelsey is extremely passionate about bringing adequate mental health care, wellness, and resources to everyone in the veterinary field. When she is not juggling work and education, Kelsey can be found hiking with her Rottweiler Copper, and snuggling with her tripod kitty Nubs. With that, I believe we will be headed into our first toast.
Okay, well, I will get us started with a toast. It's just a quote that I found from Glenn Close, but I thought it was very appropriate for tonight. So it is, what mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, more unashamed conversation. So with that, I say cheers, and let's dive into this conversation.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, I'll get us started with our first question of the evening. There seems to be such a stigma surrounding mental health. Why is that? What can we do about it? How can we change that perception? Why does it drive us all crazy?
Well, thank you. I would like to address that question. First of all, it's not just veterinarians who have a stigma about mental health. It's pretty much everyone. But veterinarians are in an odd position because we were trained to be perfectionists. We're in a competitive field, having to make the top grades to get into school, make the good grades to get out of school. And basically, we pretty much believe there isn't anything that we can't do. The problem with that is that we all have our fears and fallacies. And for us, I believe it's kind of an admission of weakness to say that we can't handle our emotions or personal problems. And so therefore, we don't want to seek out mental wellness help because it implies that we are weak in some way. And I do know the first time I ever went to a therapist was during a divorce. And I definitely needed that kind of support. But I remember looking around the lobby of the building the office was in because I was sure one of my clients would see me. And then they would think, well, if she's going to see a therapist, then she won't be able to take care of my pet. Okay. And that's just the kind of mind games that you can play with yourself. But the opposite is true. If you don't take care of yourself and your mental wellness, you won't be able to do a good job of taking care of pets.
I think that that's a really great point. So you mentioned seeing a therapist and your particular situation for that. When should someone seek out a therapist?
I will try to elaborate on that a little bit more. So I have kind of two parts to this. The first does involve that there are times, like Dr. Bishop has mentioned, where maybe you're going through a big life change or challenge where you could really benefit from that support. And then there are kind of some signs and symptoms to be watching out for. And I feel like probably most of us have experienced at least a couple of these, especially in the last couple of years. And so looking out for things like changes to your eating and sleeping habits, feeling isolated, kind of like you're on the outside looking in if you're with friends or family or even at work, and any feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, like you're just really stuck. Those are all some signs that you might be dealing with something like burnout, or at least you're heading in that direction. And getting in touch with somebody sooner rather than later can really help with that. But on the other hand, as Dr. Bishop also mentioned, I think a lot of us have kind of operated under this assumption that seeking therapy or seeking somebody to talk to is only for those times, only for the times that you're struggling or going through a major challenge or event, and that if everything is going fine, you don't really need to talk to anybody. But I kind of like to challenge that assumption and kind of spin it a little bit and looking at therapy as a way to help build your skills and your resources, your support networks, even when things are going really well. I've found that doing that, even in the good times, if anything, makes those good times a bit better, and it'll make those inevitable rough times a little bit more bearable. So with that being said, I say any time is the right time to seek out somebody to talk to.
Excellent. That makes a ton of sense. I'm curious, are there different types of therapists, and how would someone know if it was a good match, or if it was the right kind of therapist to be looking out for?
I'd like to start off on that since I had no idea what I was doing in seeking out a therapist. I knew that there were psychiatrists. I knew there were psychologists. I knew there were family counselors. There was just a whole variety if you Googled people of what all kinds of different counselors. And I was forced to go by word of mouth, just I went with a friend's personal recommendation. But Kelsey can really elaborate on all the different types of counselors there are out there. And I'll just hand it off to you, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you. So like she mentioned, there are a lot of different kind of options to look at and things to keep in mind, especially when you first start searching. You're probably going to see a lot of different letters behind everybody's names, and they all do mean something a little bit different. Psychiatrists, psychiatric nurse practitioners, they have their base medical training. So medical training as a doctor, medical training as a nurse practitioner, but also additional training for working with people with mental illnesses and other mental health conditions. So they are usually a big part of medical management for anybody with a mental illness. So not necessarily somebody you're going to seek out like one-on-one counseling with. Then you do have psychologists who would have a doctorate degree. And again, they are able to provide one-on-one sessions, and usually either do one-on-one or family, that kind of thing. And then there's a whole host of other licensed mental health professionals, I'll just call them. They are kind of, at least as far as titles, remind me of veterinary technicians in our field, where there's just so many different ways to refer to them as, depending on what state you're in. So you might find licensed mental health counselors, licensed mental health professionals, or any licensed professional counselors. They all typically have a master's degree and can usually work with individuals, couples, or families, or in groups, and dealing with kind of mental health concerns. And then I myself, I do have my master's in social work, so I'm considered a licensed master social worker right now. And social workers can have a little bit of a broader approach to therapy or approach to working with people in general, because we do work in a wide variety of settings, and we don't always just focus on providing therapy. So they might also be able to help connect you with some other resources. We tend to look at people in the context of their environment. So we're not just going to talk to you just about, whatever mental health concern you're having, but we're also going to look at what's going on elsewhere in your life to kind of try to piece together what some, good steps are for improving multiple areas and kind of get you back on your feet. That being said, there are a couple different levels of social work, but we don't need to dive too much into that. But those are just kind of the basics of what you might find when you are searching for a therapist.
Excellent. So you are working on your veterinary social worker license. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is that social workers just for veterinarians, or is that something different?
Yeah, so veterinary social work is still a fairly new field. When I started my master's social work program, not even my professors knew what I was talking about. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. And they're like, oh, didn't know that was a thing. But basically, veterinary social work does work or focus on kind of four main areas. One being working with the veterinary professionals, so our veterinarians, our support staff, our technicians, and helping them with anything from conflict management, compassion fatigue, burnout, kind of all that entails working in the field. And then we also get additional training on working with our clients. So it can be helpful if you have a client that's struggling with their pet's quality of life or making treatment decisions if their pet has a really complicated or difficult condition, as well as providing some conflict management there too. If you have a client that is, maybe really overwhelmed and feeling kind of heated in the moment, a social worker, a veterinary social worker can kind of help step in and give them that ear that they need to listen, and kind of get their concerns out without taking up all the doctor's time or all of the technician's time. And then we also receive training on grief and bereavement, as well as animal assisted intervention. So using animals in therapy settings, as well as addressing and learning more about the link between human animal violence and domestic violence and interpersonal violence. So it's kind of a very multifaceted field. So you have a lot of different directions you can go. You might see a veterinary social worker in the actual clinic. They might be in a school setting helping veterinary students or technicians. And then they also might be running their own kind of grief groups and grief and bereavement options for clients as well.
Awesome. Where could somebody go to find out a little bit more about veterinary social work?
Yeah, so the main area right now, kind of the pioneer in veterinary social work, is the University of Tennessee. So if you go to the University of Tennessee veterinary social work website, I am blanking on what exactly the link is, but
I'll throw it in the chat.
Perfect. But that website will have a lot of information, kind of break down what it means to be a veterinary social worker and how they are serving both the clients and the staff members in the field.
Excellent. For someone who hasn't had a chance to do therapy yet, what would the first couple of sessions look like or feel like?
Oh, I'll take that one. Love to comment on that. And I apologize. I've got 2 dogs roughhousing in the background, but I had no idea what to expect other than what I'd seen on TV and movies. I actually thought I was going to go lay down on a couch and answer tough questions about my childhood and my mother issues. Didn't have a clue. And what I found out is it's like a living room that you're sitting in. And it's like, if you hit the right counselor, it's like you have a new best friend. And they're very good at picking up on cues that you don't realize that you're giving. And they will ask you questions and dig a little deeper to see, what your pain points are. And so the that first session is kind of like a nice getting to know you session, where it's not like you're having a drink with a friend and you're pouring out your soul to them. This person is there to actually help you, okay? And maybe not tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. And that's from the patient, I'll say, point of view. So Kelsey, what are you trying to do on your first session with someone?
Yeah, so the first session, like Dr. Bishop mentioned, is a lot of just getting to know you. Kind of look at it. It's not too different from when somebody's bringing in their pet for the first time, maybe with a concern, maybe you've never seen them before, and they might have a laundry list of things that have brought them through the door. And our job as a therapist is to kind of narrow down and pinpoint, what are the precipitating event or events that have brought you in. Going over the first appointment can be a little bit filled with like some cumbersome paperwork and stuff. So that part might feel a little boring. And then it kind of just going over that presenting complaint. What has brought you in the door? What are you looking to get out of therapy? And then they will usually also tell you a little bit more about themselves and kind of give you an idea of what to expect and kind of how the next sessions are going to be structured, which will vary from therapist to therapist. But really, it's just like Dr. Bishop said, getting to know you, finding out some areas to focus on, some areas of concern or some areas you want to improve on. And then you can kind of go from there in the following sessions on actually articulating some goals and coming up with some concrete action steps with your therapist to figure out how to meet those goals.
Excellent. How do you know if that therapist is a good match? It's a relationship that you're trying to develop. And what do you do if you don't think you're matched well?
I can go ahead and start with this one. One of the biggest things in finding somebody that is going to work well with you is just there should always be mutual respect, mutual trust. And really, the therapist's goal should be just meeting you wherever you're at and tailoring your sessions to wherever you're at and whatever you want to accomplish. And less kind of just telling you what to do or being like, oh, well, here's what you should do. You want somebody that's really going to collaborate with you. And that being said, even if you find a good therapist, you might find that they still aren't a great match for you. Just like with us at work or in our own relationships, sometimes personalities just don't jive and you're just not going to click. And first, I just want to say that's not uncommon. So if you're ever in that situation, don't panic, don't feel like there's something wrong. Sometimes it is just kind of seeing who fits and who doesn't. It's just not a one size fits all type of situation when you're trying to find the right therapist. So if you find that it's just not working and maybe you find yourself, I know personally, my first therapist, we didn't click at all. And I toughed it out for like a month. And then after that, I was like, this just isn't going anywhere. And so the most important thing to do is just let them know. If you're not comfortable bringing that up in kind of a face-to-face or during a session, write them an email or write them a letter and just saying, hey, this isn't working, and kind of list, why you're uncomfortable or why you feel like it's not going to go anywhere. And that will either give them the opportunity to kind of write the course and get things back on track and make the adjustments they need to help you, or they will also likely have a whole network of colleagues and they can help refer you to someone else that might be a better fit. So the main thing is just that you do feel like you're going to be able to trust the person that you're working with and that they are listening to you and that you leave your sessions feeling like you've been heard, you've been understood, and not like you've ever been, judged or like your experiences are being questioned.
Well, I have something to ask for your opinion, from someone in the chat. So this particular person said they're a young veterinarian, like just starting out in the field, started, of course, during COVID, and then they had an unexpected loss of a parent. So just wondering kind of your input there. It sounds like, it's tough in the workplace. So what can this individual do to get help, and what are the good first steps there?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm really sorry for that loss. I know losing anyone can be hard, and I feel like during COVID, it's really just made it even more difficult. And I think it varies from person to person. The big thing when it comes to grief is there's no prescribed way to grieve and to do what feels right for you, whether that be talking about it to friends or family, talking about it with a therapist, or going to maybe a grief group, either online or in person, can sometimes give you a little bit more of an outlet to kind of talk about what you're going through. But really, I think those are kind of the first steps, are just seeing and thinking about what needs you think you might have right now. Where with that grief are you seeing it the most? Are you having kind of some unexpected problems crop up elsewhere that might kind of be due to this grief and due to not having the time or the ability to really feel like you're being able to process that grief? And so I definitely look for, if you're comfortable in a group situation, to maybe find a grief group or somebody else that have lost parents too.
I would like to add to that too. And again, I am sorry for your loss. Don't let anyone tell you that, okay, 2 years, you're done. That's a fallacy. And I'm sure my husband would be very happy for me to share this with you. He lost both parents very close together, and it affected him in ways that we could not have predicted. And so immediately he began seeing a psychologist, and I certainly recommend to you that will whatever support you go with, don't try to tough it out or, hold yourself to any kind of timetable or of anybody else's expectations. That's just going to make you miserable. So good luck with your endeavor on that. And everything, I believe, is 10 times worth in COVID.
Yeah. And how do you feel about kind of sharing that information in the workplace? Is that kind of an individual thing? Should you share so that your colleagues know, what you're dealing with kind of when you're not at work, or is, like share, not share, or depends on your situation? What do you think?
Kelsey, you're in the workplace.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I do think it really depends on what it's like for you at work, kind of what the dynamics are there. I would consider sharing if you have people at work that you feel like will be receptive to that and not kind of use it against you in a way. Because I know some people in the workplace just aren't going to be as welcoming or as open to talking about that kind of thing, or maybe as comfortable. They just really might not know what to say. But I think if you're fairly comfortable at work, it is not a bad idea to just say, hey, this is what I've got going on right now, and it's affecting me, X, Y, and Z ways. I'm having a hard time concentrating. I'm having a hard time with these other things, and just kind of letting them know why you're struggling. And so that if they see, they can either offer some assistance or let you take a break and kind of help work with you through that a little bit.
And Kelsey, I'm sure you understand this, but sometimes there's little unpredictable triggers. Maybe you'll see a cat that looks just like the cat that your parents used to have, and it'll just come out of nowhere. So again, having professional support, because you won't understand some of these feelings, nor will the people around you, but someone can certainly help you with that.
And I would like to add to, I know this is between you guys, but to Kelsey and Dr. Bishop's point, as veterinarians, we're taught to not be vulnerable, to be strong, to be tough. And so our go-to is to not share and to find a way to internally deal with this. And to their point as well, as many of us, have dealt with grief in different ways, there are many triggers, and you don't have to do this alone. So however you have that support, whether it's in the hospital or outside the hospital, it's good to have. So if you don't feel comfortable talking, and I used to be a multi-unit manager, so I used to have like 100 people that reported to me, and some people didn't feel comfortable talking to their boss or their colleagues. Having someone outside that you can reach out to can be very helpful when you have those triggers bubble up. So take that path as you go, but I get it. It's hard to be vulnerable.
As someone prepares for going to see a therapist, what should they budget for that? What are some of the costs associated with going to see a therapist or a psychiatrist?
I'll start, and it does vary from state to state. I can comment from Texas, about $100 an hour, I would say, was an average rate. But some companies that do not take insurance have sliding scales, and they'll quote you a number and say, well, you can either pay this or pay this, whatever you feel comfortable, and they'll let you name your rate. I'm going to let Kelsey fly on this one because she knows so many things, but I would say in the corporate clinics, if you've got mental health resources, for goodness sake, take advantage of them.
Yes.
Employee assistant programs are offered by many insurance companies. I know Aetna has one where you get so many mental wellness visits for free. And I stress that because just the whole thought of, oh no, I started with a counselor, it didn't work out, there's that money down the drain. Now I got to start over again. Remember that there's nothing that's worth your health. Okay, so please, please, please don't let a dollar sign stop you from getting some very worthwhile help. All right, Kelsey, fly with it.
Yeah, and so I'll jump a little bit more on the employee assistance program thing, just because I do think they're becoming more popular. I know most corporate clinics already have them. The VCA that I'm at right now, we get 12 free sessions. And there can be a little caveat. So I highly encourage you to call your employee assistance line and talk to them. If you don't know how to access it or don't know if you have one, usually if you talk to somebody in management, they can let you know, yes, we have one, no, we don't, and provide you a little bit more information. Because sometimes there's a little bit of a loophole with employee assistance programs that I learned when I was answering actually phone calls for employee assistance programs during school. And that is usually the sessions will be determined by time, so X sessions a year, or by issue. So if you go and you're like, I'm just having a really hard time getting along with a coworker, and you go and you take your sessions, maybe you only have 3 sessions with your employee assistance program. You have your 3 sessions. Sometimes you can actually renew them by just coming up with a new issue. So if you're like, okay, I've dealt with the coworker thing, now I want to deal with the anxiety that I have around going to bed at night or something like that. And then they will extend you for another 3 sessions. And you can sometimes kind of milk your free sessions with employee assistance programs that way. And then there are some online platforms. They can be a little bit hit or miss on finding kind of that right fit with a therapist, because doing it all online or doing it all via chat or something like that, it can just be a little bit harder to get to know each other. But those are also an option, and they also often do income-based, or you might get a discount if you have insurance or something like that. Shannon was kind enough to post one of the links in the chat just now. There's something called the Open Path Psychotherapy Collective, and they are all about bringing more affordable mental health care to people. So the people in their directory charge $30 to $80 per session for anybody making under $100,000 a year. I know a lot, especially with the veterinary support staff, you might not feel like $100 an hour is in your budget, especially if you're going weekly. So something like that might also help find a little bit more affordable ways. And then lastly, looking up any local community mental health organization. So if you Google, community mental health organization near me or something like that, they will usually have low or no cost options, especially for things like substance use and things like that, to get some extra support. And then they might also have some referrals for you. And finally, of course, if you ever find yourself in a really dire situation, we always have the suicide prevention hotlines and things like peer support warm lines, where those are more if you just need somebody to listen and somebody to talk to. Those warm lines and hotlines are usually free to use, and you can just call, and some of them you can also text, and those are free.
So we have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Dr. Hughes asks, any suggestions or recommendations when a colleague comes to you who's struggling because of the loss of a parent or other significant life event? What can they do?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, if you are around somebody who's, disclosed a big loss like that to you, is really just holding that space for them and letting them talk to you about what's going on. You may not necessarily feel like you know the right things to say or the right things to do, but a lot of times just being that listening ear and validating what they're saying and saying, yeah, it must be really hard, and just offering that empathy for what they're going through can go a really long way, and just letting them know that you're there.
Could you all post that list of resources in the chat,
Yeah.
please?
Yes, I did at the beginning. I'll post it again in just a second.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
just so everybody has that. And it's literally kind of a digital handout that provides a bunch of resources. So you don't have to worry about copying down million links that we're putting in here, although I do have a few more. But we did have someone wanting to know, it sounds like they work for maybe a corporate practice and wants to know your opinion. Is there someone to contact if you feel like you're just a number in the corporation and they don't really care about you? Sounds like they've reached out to kind of the local manager and the regional manager and not a whole lot of response. I feel like they're just kind of, dollar signs rather than, a person that may need some help.
I would say that's gonna, when you said corporate practice, it's gonna probably depend on the corporation. Usually my experience has been that there's been a way to contact a confidential ombudsman where you can report these types of feelings without fear of any retribution, because that is hard when you're talking about your quote unquote line manager. But I can speak for Mars, the Mars company's veterinary health, that they do have these individuals who you can go to without any fear of retribution. Kelsey, do you have anything to add to that one?
I don't think so. That was also really my main suggestion as well. I know, especially when things get big with corporate, it can be really easy to kind of feel like you're falling through the cracks or for it to actually happen. So finding that contact information, I'm not sure if I can find a link for that maybe. But again, it does depend on the corporation that you're with. But if you fall under the Mars one, there is that option for sure.
And I will say this, as a former employer, I mean, these kind of conversations are never comfortable, but looking at the staffing shortages, I would sure want to be made aware of these things rather than risk a good employee. And, if someone is not taking care of my employees, if, this is a person who's beneath my, you know what I'm saying? If it's a supervisor and yet I'm in charge of that supervisor, I would certainly want to know rather than lose a good employee. But that can be a sticky situation. Another thing I was going to add to Kelsey's great explanation of resources available. Don't wait because, and don't feel alone, because COVID has fleshed out a lot of mental stresses amongst people, and there can be a waiting list to get into someone. So better to start early than to wait too late. And I'd like to interject just a little story, if I may. I was on a panel discussion with a very successful woman. She was an accountant. She owned her own firm. She was the mayor of a very large Texas city. And I was on a panel with her and we got to be good friends. And one day we were having lunch and we were talking, and all of a sudden she goes, "Oh, I'm late. I've got to go. I've got my therapy appointment." And I know my mouth hit the floor. I go, "Why are you going to a therapist? I mean, you've got it all together. You're the mayor, for goodness sake. You're a successful businesswoman. I mean, if you'd ever been in her office, it was covered with awards." And she told me that she felt that a mental checkup every once in a while was every bit as important as a physical checkup. She just wanted to make sure she had her ducks in a row. She was seeing things objectively, and I have never forgotten that. And I always like to share that with anyone I'm talking to. So in this world of COVID and in the stressful world of veterinary medicine, do not feel alone or that it's a sign of weakness to just talk your thoughts out with someone occasionally.
Absolutely. It is most definitely not a sign of weakness. Do you have any additional thoughts that you would like to share with us, Dr. Bishop?
Well, just that. I just celebrated my 40th reunion with my vet school class. So I've I've seen a lot of things, and over the years, there are some things that just never change, and that's the stress in veterinary medicine, and the fact that we think we can do it all and don't need anyone's help. Okay. One time I was interviewing a veterinarian about divorce in the vet's practice, and he said, here I was worried about meeting with the architect, designing my new clinic. And, I've got all these big plans. I go home and my wife tells me she wants a divorce. And he said it was like all four tires going flat at the same time. He didn't see it coming. So things, the more they change, the more they actually stay the same. Now, where was I going with that? The fact that my very best friend, who is a veterinarian, who's also been in it for 40 years, we're both still in the profession that we love. We both take times where we will call each other. I mean, who else can understand if you had a tough surgery with a lot of little seepers, and who else can understand if a client is being unreasonable with you and takes you to task when there was no reason, they were just venting their feelings on you. And we've pretty much agreed that over the 40 years that we helped each other through some tough times. Since the first summer we were new graduates, we never practiced again in the same practice, but we remain close friends. So don't be afraid to go to a friend, but we've both been to professional counselors as well. And we both highly recommend that, because in 40 years, or when you hit your 40th reunion, we would like to see you all still enjoying your practice life, whatever path it takes you down.
That's an amazing sentiment. Thank you so much for sharing that. Kelsey, I have been so excited to hear about the University of Tennessee's program. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Do you have any further comments about that program, or any lasting thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah. For one, the program is fantastic. And while I am in the veterinary social work portion of their program, it is important to note there is also a path for people that are in veterinary medicine, like Dr. Bishop did. So we took similar but different courses with University of Tennessee. They still kind of cover a lot of the same basics. So if this is something you're interested in, but you're like, I'm not going to go get my master's in social work just to take this certificate program, you have the option of taking the veterinary medicine track as well. And I just really want to thank everyone for being here. I know talking about mental health isn't always the most exciting thing or the most fun thing, but it is really necessary, especially these days. And like Dr. Bishop said, I think a lot of us are quite innately caregivers, and that is kind of what we feel called to do. So we're taking care of our patients, we're taking care of our clients, we're taking care of friends and family members. And at the end of the day, you also need to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Because if you aren't putting yourself first, there's going to come a time where you're going to hit a limit. And no matter what you do, you're not going to be providing that level of care that you think you can, or that you think you should be able to do. So I just want to really stress how important it is to take care of yourself. Especially with how things have been in recent years. It's really easy to put yourself on the back burner. And at the end of the day, you're going to do yourself and your friends and your patients and family a lot more harm than good.
I have another story. Can I tell another story?
Sure.
Okay. So one of my very dear friends is the director of mental wellness for Blue Pearl. Okay. So we talk quite often about our fields, and she told me that, they in Blue Pearl, they are constantly counseling, because at, emergency clinics, 24-hour clinics, very, very hard. And she was telling me that it's not uncommon for her to try to schedule someone for a future therapy session. And the person says, I don't have time, I have to work. And that just kind of puts in boldface everything that we've been talking about. If you don't make time for your wellness, you'll have to make time for your illness. So please make the time.
Thank you for that. And what a great note to close out on. Right now, everyone should regather your drink. We want to thank our speakers so much for joining us and thank all of you attendees for spending some time with us. But let's wrap it up with a final closing toast.
I almost tried to give the toast on mute, but I really just want to toast everyone that is here tonight and starting to take these what can be some really tough first steps on putting yourself first and investing in your own care. So this is for you guys. Cheers.
Cheers.